So without further ado, Carmelo.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Carmelo Buttice. I'm a mortgage agent at yourmortgageyourway.ca. A little bit about myself. I'm a first generation Canadian with an Italian background. I graduated from Ryerson University in 2001, and my major is economics and statistics. I started doing my mortgage career back in 2001 as a mortgage underwriter. So I know what it's like, and I know what the banks think about when it comes to approving you to get a mortgage. Over my career, I've completed over 2,500 transactions. In my personal life, I'm a proud proud godfather of a 10-year-old godson who's turning 11 on Friday. I've been volunteering for the past 10 years in the Dominican Republic, helping the Haitian refugees. And I like to volunteer with the local churches and charities here in Toronto, such as Operation Head to Toe and Habitat for Humanity. When it comes to the mortgages and buying a property, I always like to think about what you need to know and do when it comes to being a smart buyer. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have a plan. When you have a plan, one thing the things you got to do is make a budget. So to make a budget, what you do is you look at your monthly income, and you got to think about future expenses you're going to have with this new home you're buying, whether you're buying your first home or whether you're buying your second or third or fourth home and you're upsizing. Second thing is, as you create that plan, you're looking at getting the mortgage based on what you could afford, not what the banks are going to give you. The banks are going to give you a mortgage based on how much money they can make. At the same time, you have to look at future expenses, such as we need to update the furnace, air conditioner. With a new property, need a new roof. Same thing as when creating that plan and creating that budget, you have to take a look at your net home pay, not your gross pay, because that's how the banks lend you the money. You have to look at what you take home every 2 weeks and use that to calculate what you can afford when creating your budget. When you buy the property, are you going to have additional expenses? This is a commute to and from work. Again, this is where do you need to update the furnace, the air conditioner? The roof needs to be done in 5 years. Are you putting all your savings for this down payment to cover closing costs? You have additional money and how are you going to be able to save for those future expenses? So when you're buying a home, you really want to think and create a plan, have a budget, and get a mortgage on your term, not the bank's terms. So when it comes to your mortgage and payments, there's a lot of different options when you look at interest rates. The next chart, I'm going to be looking at the Bank of Canada prime rate. Because for those looking at getting a variable rate mortgage, your variable rate mortgage is going to be tied to the Bank of Canada prime rate. So I'm showing a long graph from January 2011 to just last week, June 12, 2020. And those who want to get a variable rate mortgage, this kind of does two things. One, it shows that your rate and your payments don't change that often. If you look at the course of this is over 9 years, you can see the interest rates have only changed, I believe, 10 times. Back from the recession back in 2008, so we got to go back in time. You see from 2008 up until really is the end of 15, 16, the prime rate was flat. The government wanted to stimulate the economy and let it grow. And then afterwards in 2015, 2016, oil went down to $30 a barrel, and that you see the slight decrease. So the Bank of Canada recognized and realized that they got to support the Alberta and the Canadian economy, and they lowered the prime rate by 0.5% just to kind of keep the economy going and stimulus. Now, just like that chart that Tom showed, when prices started going up and the real estate market really began fueling, the Bank of Canada realized that, okay, the economy is really going in all cylinders. We don't have any cushion for a rainy day if the economy gets too hot. Let's start raising interest rates. Let's start normalizing because we're at extremely low levels. Then you can see really at the right hand of the chart, really it's from March. Come March, the Bank of Canada recognizes COVID-19 is impacting all economies around the world. All central banks unilaterally decide to lower rates to protect the economies to give business access to cheap credit and to help consumers have access to lower rates that have lower payments. So if you're looking at a variable rate mortgage and you want to know where rates are going to go, we are at extremely low rates. Until this COVID-19 gets sorted out, I can't really anticipate rates going up anytime soon. Now, if a vaccine were to come out, that would be a game changer. So for the next 6, 12, maybe even 18 months, I won't be surprised that Bank of Canada will not be raising the prime rate. So if you're looking at getting a variable rate mortgage, now's a very attractive time. You're going to have ultra low rates. For those who want to get a fixed rate mortgage, that's where the next slide comes in. We got to again look at the context and history of what's happening. If you're those who want to get a 5-year fixed rate, you really have to follow the Bank of Canada 5-year bond yield. That's how our banks price their interest rates. So again, going back in time, if you go back, you can see, to January 2011, the 5-year bond yield was actually cheap at that time, but high in today's standards. The rate was at around 2.5%, and then over time it's gone up and down. You can see the first decrease with regards to the beginning of 2011, 2012. You could see in 2015, short drop. That kind of matches when the Bank of Canada lowered the prime rate, and then as the Bank of Canada raised rates, you can kind of see the slowly trend upwards. On the right hand of the screen, it really brings into 2020, and you can kind of see how rates quickly drop. So on the next slide I'm going to show is going to describe how fast interest rates changed in the last few months. So at the beginning of the year, we had really low rates. We had rates under 3%, and the Bank of Canada 5-year bond rate was around 1.6%. All of a sudden, March happened. COVID-19, really took into effect with our society. Governments implemented the social distancing, closing of businesses, and you can see in 1 month, as the Bank of Canada lowered the prime rate 1.5%, you can see how quickly the rates dropped. There was a quick bounce afterwards, because that's when all of a sudden, near the end of March, the banks were introducing this mortgage deferrals and trying to assist consumers. And there was a quick bounce with that Bank of Canada 5-year bond yield. And at that time, believe it or not, people were thinking rates were still coming down, and there was a short pop with that. But ever since then, things got normalized. Governments, the markets realized that this is a long-term thing, and rates have ultimately been coming down to the point where the 5-year bond yields are around 0.4%. Now, if you're looking at getting a fixed rate, it's when the rates are 0.4% for the bond yields, it's kind of hard for it to come that much lower. If you're only going to go down to 0, and if the government's ever make us go into a negative yield, doesn't mean you're going to get a negative interest rate on your mortgage where the banks are going to pay us to borrow money. So getting a fixed rate nowadays is also very advantageous, because you can lock in a really low rate for a really long time. So when getting a mortgage, you got to literally look at the next item, the difference between a pre-approval and a firm approval. In doing this, you got to really understand what the banks look at and what the requirements are. Pre-approval is when the banks take a look at your documents, meaning your income documents, your confirmation of your down payment, your closing costs, and a credit check is done. A pre-approval. A firm approval is when you actually made an offer to buy property. Now the banks know what property they're going to be lending it on. And there's obviously a big comparison and a big difference on the type of property you buy. But what I always like to say is, if you're someone who's looking to buy a property for, say, $600,000, you're pre-approved for $600,000, which is great. But then afterwards, you want to go into a property and you're thinking about waiving financing and getting financing. And keep in mind, you always have to in mind that you only have a pre-approval. There's a very big difference between buying a $600,000 property in, say, anywhere in Toronto or the GTA. You could also look at buying a $600,000 fixer-upper, one that needs to be completely gutted or torn down and rebuilt. And you could also look at buying a $600,000 condo, or the condo may not actually have good financial statements, may not have good reserves. The bank's approved you for that same $600,000, but we're looking at 3 different properties. First property, if it's turnkey ready, they're more than happy to give you the money. If the property is going to be a fixer-upper that needs to be torn down and not livable, you got to think the banks really don't like those types of properties, so they may take that pre-approval back. And if you're looking at buying a condo, you really need to look at the status certificate. So if the status certificate in the condo has low reserves, well, again, the banks want to know that that condo is financially stable for future expenses. So pre-approval is just kind of validating what the amount of mortgage you could get. The banks only provide a firm approval once they know the type of property that they're giving you the money on, and they're comfortable with the property that you're buying. So the next item is, the importance of the financing condition. So I'll recap it. What are the banks looking for when they give you a mortgage? There's really 4 things if you break it down. They want to know you have money for a down payment and closing costs. They want to have confirmation of your employment, your income, that you have the means to make the future payments, and your job is stable. Same time, they want to do a credit check is done, where the banks want to know that you have a history of making your payments. If you had issues in 2017, if it's a one-time event, we just have to explain it, and the banks are very understanding. The last thing that the banks need to know when it comes to getting you financing is the property you're borrowing the money on. So without knowing that, they really can't give any firm financing offers at a pre-approval. So when the financing, obviously, when buying a home is a very important thing, and we are in a very competitive market. But I want to talk about both the advantages and also the disadvantages of having a finance clause. Because when you add a financing clause, you have to take the good with the bad. So I kind of wrote a list with regards to what are the advantages of having a financing condition when you buy your home. One thing, first and foremost, is once the bank knows what property you're buying, you will have 100% confidence that the bank will give you a firm approval to buy the property. And the bank is comfortable with the property that you're buying. At the same time, you'll also be able to have full details of the approval you have. The term, the rates, the payments, the amount of mortgage the bank's going to give you, and also the conditions of the financing that need to be satisfied. When you have a financing condition, if for whatever reason, and usually, the only really I see it happen more with condos is if it's, you have the status certificate done and checked, and the status certificate, the condo does not have proper reserves. Well, again, you don't lose your deposit. You have a financing clause. You can back away from the financing and you keep your deposit. At the same time, nowadays, I noticed with COVID-19, the banks are asking for more appraisals. So when you have a financing clause, an appraisal will be done. The appraisal will do 2 things. The appraisal will confirm the value of the property and also the condition of the property in the neighborhood that it's in. If by chance, you go into a few bidding wars and you really outbid this property, you want to know if the appraisal is going to confirm that you're buying a property at the value you're paying for it. If the appraisal does come in light, kind of brings the question, do you want to buy a property that's worth less? So you get a chance to if you want to walk away, you can. The last advantage of having a financing clause is it reduces any liability for yourself. If you go into a home, go into an offer, you go into the firm, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you can't close. Something happens. And something could happen during the time of you buying the home and the closing. You could lose a job, a family matter happen, a passing. I've seen a lot of things happen in my career. a financing clause, if you cannot close, if you don't have that financing clause and then you don't close, the seller has a right to sue you, and you have future liabilities that you may not want. Now, we'll talk about the advantages. Let's talk about the disadvantages. Well, the biggest disadvantage of having a financing condition is the seller may choose an offer where the buyer does not have a financing condition. I find that's usually an error a lot of sellers make, because the seller truly does not know that you have financing available, or the buyer has financing available. Ask a lot of friends and colleagues in the business. This is the only disadvantage we could think of when it comes to having a financing clause. If you could think of anything else, please share. I'm happy to listen.
Yeah, I think Carmelo, it's a good point. I mean, definitely a lot of advantages and the one disadvantage there. And the truth is, it is a competitive market, and you're going to notice that people will put offers that are not conditional. I can tell you from the last couple of weeks, it's been like that, right? So that's up to ultimately the buyer and what they prefer. But it is a competitive market out there. So if anything, do your homework. That's what I can say.
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely, to point number 2 there on the screen. It's definitely it's difficult to think about any other disadvantage. And right now, with the competitive nature of our market, you are seeing properties that have anywhere up to 47 offers on them. We can guarantee you that one of those offers at least is going to remove all of their conditions, let alone some other factors, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So last thing is, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You can see my contact information. Really quickly, I'd like to share one thing. I noticed over the last 3 months, the media talks about quite a few things with regards to, again, all these statistics with regards to these percentages and price changes and activity and volume, and they talk about interest rates. But if you really want to know answers with regards to where the direction of real estate is going, call Tom, call Eric. They're on the ground floor. They know exactly what's going on. If you want to know what's happening with mortgages, interest rates, just the other week, CMHC came out with a new rule, how they're tightening their guidelines, but the media put a really big spin on it. But the reality is, come July 1st, there is no change for those looking at buying a home with less than 20% down payment. There are 3 mortgage default insurers. CMHC is being one of them. They're a Crown Corporation, but there's still Canada Guarantee and Genworth Canada. They've officially announced that they are not tightening their guidelines. So it's really business as usual for anybody looking at buying a home with less than 20% down payment. So that being said, don't follow the headlines. If you have questions, call us directly. We have the answers.